Time for a video that no one asked for. I want to talk to you about making sense of Buddhist metaphysics. Why all of those Zen texts seem so inscrutable and difficult to make sense of. Specifically, this one, the Lankavatara Sutra, which is sort of the OG text of Zen. This is the sutra that Bodhidharma gave to his first disciple, Huiko? I think his name was Huiko. I don't know. He gave it to him. It establishes Zen as the sort of mind-only school. We'll get into that. And the Diamond Sutra, which is sort of the later era primary sutra of Zen Buddhism. And just explain how you can use these resources, the Lankavatara and the Diamond, to make progress in your meditation practice and to realize the insights that you need in order to radically reshape your human experience. So the reason that I'm hyped about, this is it, I've reversed their order. Well, the reason that I'm hyped about these two books is that they were the ones that I was engaging with during my monastic practice that really gave me the opportunity to break through in a way that took my experience from like angry, resentment, sad to, man, life is great. What a tremendous opportunity. I'm experiencing so much joy, which is, I think, something that a lot of people would like to have in their lives. It's an experience that I think we would like to aim for. And so I would like to share that. But it's really hard to tell somebody like, yeah, just go read the Diamond Sutra. Just go like read this book every single day, multiple times a day, and sit in a little shack that's 25 degrees and there's frost on the walls and break your head on this thing until all of a sudden it becomes clear to you exactly what's going on. That's a hard proposition. You don't sell that very well. So hopefully we can make it easier. If you're sort of an intermediate meditation practitioner, if you have been doing the meditation thing and you're getting some of the sort of basic results of like, oh, I'm a little more relaxed, I can think more clearly, I'm slower to anger, I can pay attention better to the machinations of my mind. If you've established yourself thus far, but maybe the big moments aren't coming, hopefully I can point you in the direction that you need to take your practice in order to get to that experience of realization. So I want to talk about three things really. Number one is going to be, what is the point of Buddhist teachings? Because I think a lot of people don't actually wrap their head around the point of the teachings, and therefore they have a really mistaken understanding of what they should be doing with the information that's presented to them. Then I want to talk about two sort of sub-disciplines of metaphysics and how they manifest in these two texts. The first being epistemology, which is the study of what is knowable and how we know. Not how we know it's knowable, but how we come to know things that we do know. And the second is ontology, which is the study of what sorts of things exist. If you've ever seen like an online debate where people are talking about, does a straw have one hole or does the straw have two holes? And people are like very animated on either side of that. That's ontology. And ontology is an interesting matter because people are very invested in their ontology. They think of it as a major component of their identity. And so they have like really strong ontological opinions with zero foundation. It just happens to be the way that it occurred to them that things are, and they've never investigated it. So in light of these texts, we're going to investigate it and hopefully improve our ontologies and thereby have a better life experience. So that's the project. Let's begin. So the first thing that I want to talk about is the purpose of Buddhist texts, because a lot of people think that the teachings are meant to give them access to like a magical mystery fact. So they have some worldview and they're going to get this fact or collection of facts, maybe this magic fact, and it's going to make their worldview a little bit bigger, but sort of qualitatively the same. We're augmenting our worldview. And this is going to be the thing that unlocks the great mysteries of life, and everything's going to be easy thereafter. And that is categorically not what it's about. There are no magic facts. There's no great mystery that's going to be revealed and suddenly everything's easy. The purpose of the teaching is to remove an obstacle in the path of some student. Uh, so it may be that the teacher is speaking directly to a student in a one-on-one context and has an intimate knowledge of their practice and therefore can sort of give them the nudge that they need, or it may be that the teacher is speaking to an audience and so they have to give a more general sort of view. But the idea is that you have this worldview and it is an obstacle to your happiness. We need to put this worldview aside and we need to replace it with something else. That something else will make your happiness possible. So it's not that we need to augment your worldview. We need to fix your worldview. We need to rebuild your worldview from the ground up into something that supports a happy, healthy human life. That's what the Diamond Sutra is getting at. That's what the Lankavatara is getting at. So it's not something that you're going to read it and you're going to go, here's a collection of new facts, and then suddenly things are going to be easy and nice. It's something that you read and it challenges your assumptions about how your entire life experience gets put together in such a way that it opens up the possibility of replacing that process with something better. So that's part one. Part two, we're going to talk about epistemology. Epistemology. So the Lankavatara is full of teachings that effectively say that the only thing that you can experience is the products of your own mind. And that mind-only school description of Zen, also the related Yogacara sect, but it's not very popular in the West as far as I understand it. It gets, I think, sometimes identified with the Western philosophical view of solipsism, which is that there's sort of only one being exists, and that's you, and everything that you experience is like a product of your imagination. I don't think that's what is actually being taught in the Lankavatara, although I certainly could be wrong about that. I've never met the person who came up with this, but it's certainly not what I took away from it. So what the Lankavatara is identifying for you is that you actually can't possibly experience anything beyond the extent of your nervous system. So what is knowable is only these sort of high level constructs of the mind, the end result of unconscious lower level processing of sensory information coming into the body. So when you're seeing, what you're seeing is an image created as a result of sort of edge detection and facial recognition and color recognition and all of these sorts of things going on to interpret the tens of thousands of neural impulses coming from the photoreceptive cells at the back of your eye on the retina. You know, little proteins are flipping configurations in response to being whacked by photons. And those work their way up to the part of your brain that actually processes visual data, and they go through all of these algorithms to produce a final picture, and you have no experience of any of that. You just see the picture. That is a construct that lives entirely within your mind. That experience does not live in the outside world. It is not part of the outside world. We hope that it reflects the outside world, at least a subset of the outside world, but it is not direct knowledge of the outside world. So a huge amount of processing is going on to build up the experiences that you have. All we can know is the product of our minds. And that sounds very limiting when you first encounter it, but it's actually very liberating, because what is being pointed out to us in the Lankavatara, in the Diamond, is that on some level, some of that processing, not all of it, certainly not even close to most of it, but some of that is actually accessible to us. So we are used to living in this sort of final experience that's created by this process, but we can actually open up the hood on at least some of the layers uh, and tinker with the process by which our experience gets built up. And if we do that, if we practice that diligently, it gives us many more degrees of freedom to shape an experience. And what we discover is that in any configuration of brute facts coming in from the world, uh, there is very likely to be some experience compatible with it that we can build in response to those facts that is happy, that is joyful, that supports our well being. So we're used to facts come in from independent reality, they impinge upon our sensory apparatus, and then a whole processing stage goes on, and it's all in the background. We don't have any experience of that, and then an experience is foisted upon us, and maybe it's a joyful experience, but maybe it's a miserable experience, and we just have to accept it. What we are given the opportunity to discover in realizing that everything that we experience is just the constructs of our own mind is that we are our mind. So we can actually modify those constructs, and we can modify those constructs in a systematic way that gives us a robust experience of our own well-being, whatever the environment is choosing to do. The last thing that I wanted to talk about is ontology as it relates to the Lankavatara and the Diamond Sutra. When I read the Lankavatara, there's so much metaphysics in this book. There's so much discussion of categorization of experiences and mental states and causes and conditions and all of this stuff. And I honestly just have given up on trying to understand the fine detail of what all those categories mean, because I don't think that they actually mean anything. I think that the purpose of all of that categorization is to act as a bludgeon to your own ontological assumptions. And the thing that got me there was, I think, from chapter 4 of the Diamond Sutra. If I was a more sensible person, I probably would have prepared some of this and read it ahead of time, but I think I know the Diamond pretty well. Where are you? Perception of objects. Oh no, it's from chapter 3. Subhuti, the questioner in the Diamond Sutra, is asking questions of the Buddha about bodhisattvas, who are like the beings who are the sort of goal state of a practitioner in Mahayana Buddhism. And the Buddha replies to a question. The question doesn't matter. A bodhisattva who creates the perception of a being cannot be called a bodhisattva. And why not? No one can be called a bodhisattva who creates the perception of a self or creates the perception of a being, a life, or a soul. What was my response to that as a student sitting in my little shack trying to figure out what's going on here? So we have this notion of the goal of Mahayana Buddhist practice, the bodhisattva, the person who is resolved to be reborn into suffering as many times as it takes to save every being. I've never subscribed to Buddhist metaphysics. That's a bunch of nonsense to my mind, but it's really helpful aspirational nonsense, right? It makes you resolve to commit to your practice in a way that you might not otherwise get to unless you had this sort of like way overshoot kind of target to aim for. But we have the bodhisattva who's supposed to save all beings, but is not allowed to create the perception of a being, a life, or a soul. Then what the heck is the bodhisattva perceiving? What and creating perceptions? Right? That gets to that mind only creating the perception of a being. I am used to this notion that I am a passive receiver of perception. So the idea of creating perceptions was very new to me when I was first engaging with this. But if you begin to really dig at what does the world look like if I reject the categories of a being, a life, or a soul. Soul was not actually that hard for me. I was an atheist at the time. But being and life, just throw those out. Well, what does the world look like? Aren't those sort of necessary categories in order to engage fruitfully with the world? And there's a negation of a huge range of categories that one takes for granted are essential to come to grips with the range of one's experiences throughout the Diamond Sutra and the Lankavatara. And if you take those seriously, if you try to live a life without those categories, what you find is that they're doing less work than you expect. That a smaller ontology and a finer grained ontology is possible. You can think of sort of your ontology as your building blocks that you're going to build your experience out of, right? So you have these streams of sensory data coming into your system, and those get turned into objects, and those are the building blocks of your experience. And the fine-grainedness of that system of categorization dramatically affects what experiences are possible. You can imagine, if you had a very pixelated image of the Earth, it'd be difficult to make out the structures of the geography of the Earth. I'm going to try to see if I can make that. And if you had smaller pixels, then you could make out more detail. It's a bit like that with your ontology. And so if you have sort of a very spare ontology, if you don't have a bunch of complicated categories, but if you have instead a practice of paying attention and a very simple mechanism of building up the necessary ontological categories in response to your experience instead of trying to decide all of the things that exist in advance, you end up with, again, many more degrees of freedom in composing your experience, and you're able to come up with sort of more subtle experiences from a given set of incoming facts. And that gives you the freedom that you need to find sort of the nuanced takes on the brute facts coming from the world that are going to make that more compatible with your own sense of your well-being. So if you only have, 5 boxes and everything, and they're all these big boxes, a lot of different information about them, and everything that you experience has to fit in like one of the 5 boxes. That sounds like an exaggeration when you put it in that abstract way, but like a lot of people are going through life with only 2 boxes. Things are either good or evil, right? And it's like everything that I experience has to be good or evil. And you end up with 2 boxes that contain a whole bunch of disparate experiences that don't actually necessarily have a lot in common with each other other than they happen to get categorized in this way. If you instead have a system that allows you to build 100,000 boxes, and you build the boxes you need for the experience that you're creating in this moment, consistent with the facts that are being presented to you, then you're going to have a lot more flexibility to find those nuanced positions that make it possible to take adverse circumstances and still build an experience that's compatible with being a happy human being.